My name's Neil Evers. I'm a descendant of the Gadigal clan. The Gadigal people are part of the oldest continuous culture in the world. And I pay respect to my elders, both past and present, and those issuing. I also like to recognise their strength, their resilience and their courage. I've lived on the northern beaches now all my life. I was born at Collaroy when the northern beaches was bush and country. The city limits actually stopped at DY. I've lived at Mona Vale most of my life. If you know the area, and you'll know where Aldi's are, that's where our family home used to stand. And I can remember Mona Vale just having 6 shops in it. Mona Vale School at the time had 52 children in it. There was one building. It was a great school to go to. Again, it was just all bush. The only thing that was cleared was the football field or the cricket pitch. I've been back to the school there and it's just totally changed. The headmaster there asked me, was this building here? No. He said, what was here? I said, one building. My father, he was a fisherman, and he unfortunately didn't go to war because he was a provider for food for the people. After the war, he was a bit annoyed though, but all his mates had gone there, never seen any action, and come back and got war loans. They got all that sort of stuff where he got nothing. So he eventually became a builder, very successful, working for people, not his own. After I left school, I became a butcher. And I did that for probably 8.5 years, something like that. And outside of there used to be a horse trough where horses would come in, pick up their groceries, and not their groceries, but people riding the horses. As a matter of fact, the mail was delivered by a lady on horseback. And, so it was country, really country. But it wasn't until about nearly 15, maybe 18 years ago that we got a call from a cousin who I never knew about, saying that we were actually related to Aboriginal people, which took the wind out of your sails a little bit, but we took it on board, and we're now very proud of the fact. About 40 years after all the devastation here, they were doing a survey up around the end of the northern beaches, over into Brooklyn and all around there, and they said there was quite a few Aboriginal people there then. So the population had started to come along. To date, 2022, I believe there's something like 2,500 Aboriginal people living on the northern beaches. You wouldn't know because a lot of them are myself. One lady said to me the other day, how do I know you're Aboriginal? You got white skin and blue eyes. Well, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was English, because my grandmother on my mother's side, she was definitely Aboriginal. We all thought she had a good suntan. She was a fiery little thing, and she lived at Mona Vale. If you know the area, directly across from Woolworths on Pittwater Road. There's now a block of home units there. Their land went from there right down to Darley Street, and down at the end of Darley Street there was a small mob of Aboriginal people lived there, and she would cook dinner up for them and put it on the windowsill, and they'd come and get it. And where we lived in Warringah Street, my parents said, don't go over the hill because the Aboriginal people will get you. And as kids we thought, well, we don't want that to happen, but they would have been our cousins. Had we have gone, we would have got massive amount of culture and all that sort of stuff. But had we have gone, you got to remember that was in the time of the stolen generation. So, heavens knows, as I said, this was classified as country out here. We could have been taken away. And I've got 2 sisters, and we certainly didn't want that to happen. So my parents never brought up. Although I was thinking about this today, actually, when they're talking about the voting. My father, when he came back from voting, And I said, so how'd you go? He said, oh, I do the same thing every time. I said, oh, do you? Yeah. He said, I write across the sheet, give it back to the blacks. It would have been an informal vote, but he was getting his point across. And about going up and not seeing the Aboriginal people up the hill, that's the only 2 times I can remember my parents ever saying anything, because they were protecting us. So we've done a lot of research, massive amount of research on it. You get all the different conflicting stories and so forth. You want the truth, and sometimes it's hard to find, so you just got to just keep searching. We want to teach people and help people understand that this area went through absolute devastation when the English arrived. There was somewhere 80-90% of the people just wiped out. There's stories of decaying bodies in caves and bodies floating down rivers, and it must have been a horrible, horrible sight. But fortunately, didn't get up towards Brooklyn and all around that area, which was great because that's where our ancestors come from. The cousin that got in touch with me is called Bob Walterer. Unfortunately, Uncle Bob's not with us anymore. But there was a book produced called Bob Walterer's Family Tree. He and his sister owned a house next door to one another at Brookvale. His sister died, and they sold both properties together to developers. And he went through his sister's belongings and found a case with all the documents dating back to 1775 of birth certificates, death certificates. The whole lot was there. So what he did was started to ring around all the people that he knew in the family. And he got to about 120. And then, of course, it started to accumulate from there. At that time, the Warringah Council offered to help produce a book, and also the Aboriginal support group also helped as well. And by the time they'd researched the book and got as many people as they could in there, they had to stop at nearly 1,200 people. And we still get people today saying we've done research, and yes, we can connect back to Bungaree, which is the elder we go to. If you've not heard of Bungaree, he was born, from all the records we've got, at Patonga, which is right here in Pittwater. His clan was up around the Wyong area, in Currabong and so forth. He would have been about 13 when Cook arrived. Some people mistake that as Captain Cook. He was not a captain, he was lieutenant. Cook was surprised that all the way up the coast, as he went up there was a fire on every headland. They knew he was coming, which is just amazing that it got around that quick. The way around, of course, is what we use now is right here in Pittwater Road. They would have used that as a track. It's the quickest way to get from A to B. When the English arrived, everything had become Crown land. The land belonged to the Crown. Aboriginal people say we don't own the land owns us. But that was a different rule come in. And when Macquarie went up to see Bungaree and that, they saw the timber up there was just magnificent. But one of the reasons that Macquarie brought Bungaree down here was he tried to make him civilised. If he could civilise Bungaree, then maybe he could civilise other Aboriginal people. This wasn't the only person he tried to civilise. There were others around as well. Once the devastation had taken place here, and obviously there was nobody here. So Bungaree come down. I've read where it said he had about 100 people in his mob, and they come down to Kirribilli, where Kirribilli House is today. And they used to go from Kirribilli over to what we call Sydney, one could assume they would use the incoming and outgoing tides to be able to get them across. Sydney may not have been as wide as it is now, who knows. They obviously went back home again because there's records of Macquarie going up there and having dinner up there. I forget the years now myself, but there's Kawabaris up there, and Macquarie said they had a great time dancing and didn't get to bed till about 11 o'clock and all that sort of stuff. But Bungaree was also a very good friend of Governor Macquarie, and Macquarie, as I said before, tried to civilise him by giving him, I think it was 16 acres of land at Georges Heights at Mossman. The idea was to cultivate the land. Bungaree eventually come down, I think it was 1792, but he became very interested in sailing, and he sailed up and down the east coast of Australia with many of the yachts that went up and down, because what they were looking for is more land to put the convicts into. You know, when Bungaree come down with his mob to Kirribilli, it's said that he come down with his language, the Winniginny language of the Guringai people. So we're now saying, well, that's the language of the area, because Bungaree used to get on board the boats that come in, or the ships that come in here, and he would be actually piped on because they respected him so much, and he would then say, these are my people and this is my land. So as far as we're concerned, it's Winniginny country, and that's the way we like to keep it. Bungaree was the one who discovered Newcastle for them, you know, and unfortunately up there he also pointed out that they had this black stuff that just keeps burning. It was coal. So that's where the coal mines obviously started up there. Again, the dates I forget, but he sailed from Sydney to Norfolk Island in 60-day return trip. The boat was only something like 25 tonnes, which is a very small vessel. On that trip, he met Matthew Flinders, and Matthew Flinders really enjoyed his company. Flinders eventually got him to on board the boat, the ship, to go around Australia when they were remapping it, and that must have been a horrific trip, because you got to remember, Australia, what we know now as Australia, had about 350 odd different national clans on board, or countries on board. They all spoke different languages and dialect. So Bungaree would not have known, over what we call Western Australia, how to speak their language. But he had to negotiate with them because they needed timber to fix the leaking, they needed food, they needed water. In some cases it's written that Bungaree would be on the boat, stark naked, with his hands out, saying, "Here I am, I've got no weapons, we come in peace," you know. And he was able to negotiate and get what they wanted, which is fantastic. But that's the sort of person he was. But they had to pretty well hurry up with this, because the French and the Russians were pretty well close behind them too. They wanted it down here. Anyway, at the end of the voyage, Matthew Flinders said to Bungaree, "This place has got too many names. I intend to just call it one, Australia." And he said to Bungaree, "I'll be able to call you an Australian then," making Bungaree the first person ever to be called an Australian. Bungaree used to give demonstrations of the boomerang, because the boomerang didn't actually come from here, it came from up north, and so Bungaree must have brought it back when he came back from one of his tours up that way. And so he used to do that, which was all good, but at the same time he got very sick there, and he was hospitalised. Governor Macquarie gave him enough to eat and all that, but he then went to Garden Island where he died, and then he was taken from there around to Rose Bay. There's about 20 Aboriginal graves there, and Bungaree was buried beside his first wife, Matora. Now, back then they used to wrap them in the blanket that they'd been given and bury them in that. But Bungaree was actually given a coffin and put in a coffin and buried because of the respect they had for him. So that was the end of Bungaree, and now we're trying to keep him alive and all the bits and pieces that he did. And it's been, as I said before, life-changing to me and to my family. And on it goes. I'm now the chairperson of the Aboriginal support group, Manly Warringah Pittwater. I also edit their magazine, the Matter, and try and keep a finger in with the website and the Facebook site and organising talks and all that sort of stuff. To know that it's getting across, that's the big point, that people are interested in it. The comments we get back from that Matter is just great, you know. They're interested in it, they want to learn, they want to come along. But just to be able to go out and tell kids about what happened here, not that I was here, but what Aboriginal kids used to do, what they would have done, you know, it's just fascinating to me. And I love talking about it, because it's that generation of kids that we've got to get to know the truth, because there's so many lies about it that we don't want that to happen. We're not born with prejudice, but it comes along. And if we can get to the kids early enough, they can see it. And a lot of them are seeing it, which is fantastic. Fantastic.